Today, we're talking about a huge new player that just stepped onto the scene in the world of AI programming. It's called DeepSeek Coder. And look, this isn't just some small update. It's a series of models that's really aiming to be a total game changer for developers.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's start with a question I'm pretty sure has crossed your mind. Does it ever feel like the absolute best AI coding tools, the ones that could genuinely change how you work, are always locked behind some proprietary, expensive paywall? Are we really stuck having to choose between raw power and open access?
Okay, let's dive right into that, because this really gets to the core of why a model like DeepSeek Coder is such a big deal. For a long time, this gap in performance between the open source models and the closed source ones has been a major roadblock for so many of us.
Yeah, historically, the trade-off has been super clear, right? On one hand, you've got the closed source titans like GPT-4. They are unbelievably powerful, no doubt. But how they work is a total black box, and if you want to use them for anything serious, it can get really expensive fast. Then, on the other hand, you have the open source models. They're free, you can see how they work, you can tweak them, but let's be honest, they've almost always been a step or two behind on actual performance. You had to pick your poison.
Well, it looks like that trade-off might finally be coming to an end. This is where DeepSeek Coder storms onto the scene. It's a brand new open source challenger, and it was built from the ground up with one goal in mind: close that gap. So let's get into the specs, because honestly, they're pretty wild.
First up, the raw fuel this thing was trained on. Get this, 2 trillion tokens of source code. That is just a mind-bogglingly huge dataset, giving it this incredibly deep well of knowledge to draw from. And we're not just talking about 1 or 2 languages here. DeepSeek Coder is a true polyglot. It was trained on code from 87 different programming languages. Seriously, Python, C++, all the way to things like Haskell and Shell. Its range is just massive, which makes it an amazing tool no matter what you're working on.
Okay, this next number, 16K, that's its context window. Think of it like the model's short-term memory. And having a bigger window is a huge deal. It means the model can grasp so much more of your project all at once. We're not talking about a single little function anymore. We're talking about understanding entire files and how they all connect. For complex, real-world coding, that is absolutely essential.
But here's the thing. It's not just about throwing bigger numbers at the problem. The real secret sauce, the genius part, is in how they trained this thing. And this is where DeepSeek Coder really starts to pull away from the crowd. I absolutely love this analogy, because it just clicks. See, most code models are trained on these isolated single files, like one recipe out of a book. Sure, they learn the syntax, they learn some patterns, but they completely miss the big picture. DeepSeek Coder, on the other hand, was trained on entire software repositories, the whole cookbook. It learned how different files import each other, how classes talk to one another, how an entire project is supposed to fit together.
And getting to that whole cookbook level of understanding wasn't easy. It was this incredibly careful, meticulous process. They started by crawling data from places like GitHub, but then they filtered out all the low-quality stuff. And then they did something crucial. They actually parsed the dependencies between the files, and even removed duplicate repositories. This ensures the model is only learning from high-quality, well-structured code. It's basically industrial-grade data cleaning.
Then there's this other really clever technique they use called fill in the middle, or FIM for short. So instead of just trying to predict the next word in a line, FIM teaches the model to insert code based on what comes before it and what comes after it. It's like a supercharged autocomplete that can fill in the blanks anywhere in your code, not just at the very end.
And this right here shows you exactly how it works. It's pretty simple when you see it laid out. You just give the model the beginning part, the prefix, and the ending part, the suffix. That creates a whole, and the model's entire job is to generate the code that perfectly fills that gap. This is just unbelievably useful for things like code completion, or even refactoring.
So, okay, we've got massive training, smart data, innovative techniques, the whole package. But the real question is, does any of it matter? Does it actually perform? Let's get to the fun part and check out the benchmarks. So here we go, a head-to-head showdown on Human Eval, which is a big deal benchmark for code generation. The 33 billion parameter version of DeepSeek Coder comes in with an average score of 50.3%. And that soundly beats its main open source rival, the slightly bigger CodeLlama 34B, which only got 41%. Bottom line, in its weight class, it's the undisputed champ. But this next part might just be the most stunning result of them all.
The much, much smaller 6.7 billion parameter DeepSeek Coder still beats the 34 billion parameter Code Llama. A model that is 5 times smaller is more powerful. That just shows an incredible level of efficiency. And it means we can get this state-of-the-art performance on hardware that's way more accessible.
And just when you think that's impressive, it doesn't stop with the open source rivals. Oh no. Once they fine-tuned the model with instructions, it started going after the closed source champions. The paper says it all. The 33B instruction-tuned model straight up surpasses GPT 3.5 Turbo, one of the most popular models on the planet, on several coding benchmarks.
And you can see that clearly right here on this LeetCode benchmark, which is all about solving those really tricky competitive programming problems. DeepSeek Coder Instruct 33B solves almost 28% of them, beating GPT 3.5 Turbo and just crushing Code Llama. It is the only open-source model on this list that actually outperforms GPT 3.5.
All right, so we've seen the specs, we've seen the training methods, we've seen the benchmarks. What does this all boil down to? What does the arrival of a model like DeepSeek Coder really mean for you, for me, for the future of how we write software?
Well, let's break it down. First, you are getting state-of-the-art performance that can go toe-to-toe with and even beat some of the top proprietary models. Second, and this is huge, it's completely free for both research and commercial use. That is a massive unlock for innovation. Third, because it was trained on entire repositories, it just gets your code base on a much deeper, more contextual level. And finally, that fill-in-the-middle feature makes it a phenomenally powerful tool for code completion.
And this brings us right back to that question from the beginning. For so long, it felt like the best tools were locked away. But with models like DeepSeek Coder, that's all changing. The walls are coming down, the performance gap is closing. So the big question isn't really about the model anymore, is it? It's about you. It's about us. What are we going to build now that this kind of power is finally open and free for everyone?